Everyone, this as a reminder, only residents of the district may vote on any of the motions tonight or the levy.
I'll keep an eye on that for you.
Thank you. At this point, I will call for nominations for a chairperson for the annual meeting.
I nominate Ted as chairperson. Second.
We will have, can I have a roll? We'll do a voice. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? I do it myself. I can say aye. All right, I guess apparently I'm the chairperson of this meeting. Clerk, Mr. Brown, Dr. Brown,
Yes,
can you please
yes.
read the notice of the annual meeting?
Sure. Notice is hereby given to the qualified electors of the Salem School District that the annual meeting of said district for the transaction of business will be held at the Salem School District in the large group instruction room, LGI room, on the 24th day of October 2023, following the conclusion of the budget hearing, which will begin at 6 p.m. The date of this 26th day of September 2023.
Thank you, Steve. At this point, can you please read the annual meeting minutes from October 25th, 2022?
Sure, be glad to. The meeting was called to order at 5:30 p.m. Salem School in the large group instruction room. It was called to order by Dana Powers at 5:33 p.m. Jack Nicolai, Deputy Clerk, read the notice of the hearing because Steve was late. Review of the proposed budget thank you for coughing, for the 2022-2023 school year. Adjournment, Dana Powers, Nick Poloni motion to adjourn the meeting at 6:06. A voice vote was taken, the motion carried. Then the annual school district meeting minutes, October 25th, 2022, 6 p.m., Salem School in the large group instruction room, LGI. The meeting was called to order by Dana Powers at 6:07 p.m. Dana Powers appointed Steve Brown as the secretary of the meeting. Election of the chairperson of the meeting. The floor was open to nominations for chairperson. Jack Nicolai nominated Dana Powers as chairperson. It was seconded by Ted Gergen. A voice vote was taken and the motion carried. Steve Brown, clerk, read the notice of the meeting. Steve Brown, clerk, was asked to read the minutes of the annual meeting of October 26, 2021. Steve Brown, Jack Nicolai motion to approve the 2021 annual meeting minutes. A voice vote was taken, the motion carried. Ted Gergen, treasurer, read the report of the auditor for the 2020-2021 school year. Ted Gergen and Steve Brown motion to approve the 2020-2021 audit report. A voice vote was taken and the motion carried. Dana Powers, chairperson, asked Ted Gergen to present the treasurer's report for the 2021-2022 school year. Ted Gergen read the treasurer's report. Ted Gergen, Nick Poloni motion to approve the 2021-2022 treasurer's report. A voice vote was taken, the motion carried. Dr. Vicki King, district administrator, presented the district report. Dana Powers, chairperson, asked Ted Gergen, treasurer, to present the 2022-2023 budget. Ted Gergen asked Marquez Guzman, business manager, to discuss the budget and address any questions from the audience. Marquez Guzman led a discussion of the proposed tax levy, motion for the tax levy for the 2022-2023 school year by ballot. Steve Brown, Jack Nicolai motion that there be levied a school tax assessed against all taxable properties within the district in the sum of $7 billion.
$7 million.
Okay.
Regroup.
$7,436,462, which includes a general fund 10 levy of $4,874,037 and $4,874,84,327. Sorry. Necessary to approve and maintain the district school system and to finance the recommended budget for the 2022-2023 school year. Three residents were appointed to tabulate the written ballots: Ted Gergen, Nick Poloni, and Chris Skrzynecki. Votes were tabulated and presented by Ted Gergen. The levy was approved 7-0. Other business: the Board of Education salary. Jack Nicolai and Nick Poloni motion that we pay each board member $200 for every monthly regular board meeting attended. A voice vote was taken. The motion carried. The Board of Education mileage. Nick Poloni, Steve Brown motion to set the mileage consistent with the IRS standard mileage rate. A voice vote was taken and the motion carried. That the 2023 annual meeting date and time. Ted Gergen, Steve Brown motion to set the 2023 annual meeting date for October 24, 2023 at 6 p.m. A voice vote was taken and the motion carried. Other items as allowed by law. Adjournment: Ted Gergen, Nick Poloni motion to adjourn the meeting at 7:11 p.m. A voice vote was taken and the motion carried.
Thank you, Steve. Beautiful.
Can I please have a motion to approve the minutes?
A motion to approve the minutes as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. I'm going to turn it over to Nicole to present the 21-22 audit report.
All right. Just a reminder that this audit report is from the 2021-2022 fiscal year. The 2022-23 audit report will be submitted in December 2023. The 2021-22 audit report was prepared by Sitzberger CPAs and Business Advisors. Earlier this year, they rebranded themselves and now go by Lucida Tax and Accounting Solutions. The financial audit is an annual requirement for school districts per Wisconsin Statute 120.14. It is an annual examination of financial accounts to ensure their accuracy. The auditors verify various balance sheet, revenue, and expense accounts through third-party confirmation, review of source documents, and testing of sample transactions. After the audit concludes, the auditors prepare a report and provide financial statements for all of the funds, as well as supplementary information related to things such as the district's cash and investments, capital assets, debt, employee retirement plans, and other post-employee benefits. The auditors found no significant material weaknesses. However, they noted 3 financial statement findings. Due to the size of our school district, we will likely continue to have the first 2 of these 3 findings on future audits. These 3 findings were: number 1, lack of segregation of duties. We are continually looking at ways to segregate duties in line with best financial practices, even if additional segregation of duties does not meet the auditor requirements. The district will continue to monitor all functions of personnel on a timely basis to prevent the possibility of theft or misappropriation of assets. Number 2, financial statement preparation. To correct this finding, we would need to employ an auditor on site, which is not feasible for the district. Our corrective action is that the district will continue to provide oversight from the Executive Director of Business Services and will make all management decisions, including the review and approval of all financial statements prior to their release. Number 3, excess of expenditures over budgeted amounts. For the 2021-22 fiscal year, certain expenditure accounts of the district were expended over budgeted amounts. While we approved budget amendments in June 2022, the board did not approve the Fund 46 transfer until July 2022, and we did not do another budget amendment following the transfer. For the 2022-23 fiscal year, the board approved budget amendments again in July, so this finding should not occur on the upcoming audit report. Anyone who would like to take a look at the audit report can visit the district's business office webpage, or they can request a copy from the business office.
Thank you.
Any questions at all for Nicole? Can I please have a motion to approve the the audit, the 2021-22 audit report?
So moved.
Was that the motion?
I need a motion. Sorry.
I move to approve the 2021-2022 audit report as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Nicole, can you please present the treasurer's report?
Of course. I'd like to present the treasurer's report for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2023. First, we'll go through the revenue for each fund group, then the expenditures, and lastly, we'll go over the fund balances for each fund group. For revenues, general fund 10, $15,297,256.61. Special projects fund 21, $12,371,053. Special education fund, fund 27, $864,361.74. Debt service funds 38 and 39, $21,088,247.85. Capital project funds 46 and 49, $429,509.57. Food service fund 50, $524,416.20. For expenditures, general fund 10, $14,919,645.12. Special projects fund 21, $12,436.43. Special education fund, $2,025,285.40. Debt service funds, 38 and 39, $20,638,144.83. Capital project funds, $2,041,053.24. Food service fund, Fund 50, $348,801.95. For the fund balance, we have the general fund, 10, $3,582,761.74. Special projects fund, 21, $33,999.01. Special education fund, 27, $0, no fund balance allowed. Debt service funds, 38 and 39, $464,708.23. Capital project funds, 46 and 49, $21,926,504.79. Food service fund, 50, $283,620.64. A total cash and investment asset total, June 30th, 2022, $25,303,430.37. For June 30th, 2023, $25,152,062.38. And just a reminder that these are unaudited numbers, so they could change slightly if there are any adjustments made before the audit is finalized in December 2023. And then some notes here. The 2022-23 year-end records show a general fund balance increase of $377,611.49, which brings our fund balance to 24.01% of general fund expenditures, which is in accordance with our minimum of 15% fund balance. The district was unable to avoid short-term borrowing for the 2022-23 fiscal year, so we borrowed the same amount as the 2021-2022 fiscal year. The district borrowed a total of $300,000 from Community State Bank for a total cost of $1,641.78, and that was paid off in January 2023 once property taxes were received.
so much, Nicole. Can I have a motion to approve the treasurer's report?
I move to approve the treasurer's report as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Nicole.
All right. I will be brief in my superintendent's report because you have all heard this and we have no one for the community, but for the sake of streaming and for minutes purposes next year, we have our finalized mission and vision statement through the strategic plan last year. I want to highlight some of the ways that we are addressing the mission and our vision. The mission of cultivating lifelong learners to achieve their full potential, and our vision to create a community that fosters a safe environment, enthusiastic exploration, and an opportunity for personal growth. These three goals through our student growth and achievement. I will highlight some of our data in this meeting, but if any of the audience wants to see a more detailed assessment review, we're going to do that in our board report. Our learning and working environment, we've done some excellent work that's in tandem with our stewardship of resources, in which we have been doing, looking at our compensation review. So there's a couple of highlights that I will provide for the community here. What you're looking at right here is one of the images from our recently, we just had our policy 5410. This is a review committee that's looking at retention, social promotion, and our placement policy. And we had students on this committee. We had a former Salem student who's at the high school, social workers, families, teachers, and administrators. And the students at this particular station, they were talking about what it looks like to be a successful student, because we thought it's important for them to be able to share from their perspective. And so we did a carousel learning, and this is one of the stations, but we were really digging into previous empirical data and research on retention and social promotion practices, but also a really recent study in 2023 that just looked at some more recent longitudinal data examining this practice that I think was really interesting for us to think about. So that's one of the ways that we're starting to look at that student accountability, but also creating an environment for our students where they understand that responsibility and caring about what their work, it is important. That middle school and the learning that we do starting in the early grades makes a difference. What you'll see here, we're going to later on this tonight in our board meeting, we are recognizing our community member. He's our Salem greeter. But what I'm highlighting here is just this idea that our director of communications is really trying to find ways to keep us connected with the community. And this is just one of the other ways that we're going about doing that. More to come in about 45 minutes. Our compensation committee that is looking at our compensation model, I just want to highlight some of the things that they really are intentional about believing, that long-term sustainability. So the work that we're doing in this budget hearing in a few minutes, and the work that we're doing to ensure that we have financial stability, that was one of the beliefs that came out in that conversation. The idea of rewarding ongoing professional growth and learning. So how can we recognize our staff as they continue to build their expertise was something that was really clear. And then that increased student achievement and growth. So the pillars, those three pillars that we've grounded our strategic plan on, those are the things that these meetings we're finding to be really important. And then finally just had to throw in, even when it's really rainy and cold, the people, they still come out, the community still comes out for our harvest. And it was a lot of fun. It was wet and chilly, but Salem is a really exciting place for people to be. And so I'm super thrilled to be a part of this community. And without further ado, here's some data. Highlights of data that you're going to get very... you're going to hear about coefficients and things in another board meeting coming up here soon to talk about our data. But we can see that this is our spring MAP data last year. That's the top scale compared to our fall. Typically what we see is a summer slide where there's a slight regression. That's really kind of what we anticipate when we go into learning. We started our year off with intervention groups already in place. That blue is really the middle, I guess it's a purplish color, is the 50th percentile, meaning how our students are meeting at that 50th percentile. So you can see those bars are pretty similar You'll see in reading, it's actually, it's even better than in the math, but it is, when we look at different types of reports, we tend to see a little steeper drop in math in the fall, but here I'm pretty happy with the stability here, and more to come in about 45 minutes from Craig. For our reading, here's where you can see in all areas, in that blue, that dark purple blue color, and the light green and the highlighted blue, they're much bigger in or not much bigger. They're growing compared to the below level for the fall compared to the spring. So you'll see in the presentation here some of the things that we're doing to address making sure our students are growing. This is achievement, but we'll look at growth data for our MAP scores. We'll look at some of the interventions we're doing and how we're tracking that rate of improvement in significant detail. But we want to make sure that what we're doing is helping show improvement for our students. And we'll talk a little bit about our attendance work that we've been doing to address if kids aren't here in that lower area, we have to make sure their bottoms are in seats so we can teach them. So those are the things we're working on. Now, I will pass it over to you.
Thank you. Steve, can you please read the notice of budget hearing?
Sure, be glad to.
Notion on that though, the date, it says the 26th day of September 2023, should that be today's date?
This was the notice that went in the newspaper.
Okay, so I was confused.
It was,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I saw it when you said it, I was like, okay.
Yeah, I know, the last time, okay.
Yeah.
A notice of budget hearing, a notice is hereby given to the qualified electors of the Salem School District that the budget hearing will be held at the Salem School District in the large group instruction LGI room on the 24th day of October 2023 at 6 p.m. The summary of the budget is printed below. Detailed copies of the budget are available for inspection in the district's office at 8828 Antioch Road, Salem, Wisconsin, 53168, dated this 26th day of September 2023, and it's signed by Stephen Brown, District Clerk.
Thank you, Steve. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Nicole to present the 2023-24 budget.
Oh, okay.
Good. This is your first one, I think.
All right. All right, Marquez, could you please explain the budget for us?
Sure, I've been dying to talk.
And don't forget the tax levy calculation.
All right, sounds good. All right, so we kind of changed the format of this meeting a little bit. We used to do the budget hearing first and then the annual meeting. Now we've kind of put the budget hearing kind of in the middle of the annual meeting. So I have a little less time to talk, which I think is a good thing. But also I think in the past, the last couple of years, it's been very repetitive. We kind of presented the budget at the budget hearing, did it annual meeting, and then did it again at the October regular board meeting. So hopefully this will be a little bit smoother of a process, less repetitive. I do want to just kind of start out by talking about the budget timeline. So back in June, at the June 27th board meeting, the school board approved the 2023-24 preliminary budget. That was kind of new this year. In the past years, we didn't approve an official budget. We presented one, but there was never any formal approval. But when we approved that, there were still a lot of unknowns. The state budget was still kind of being ironed out. Obviously, the pupil count still had to be done. And then in October, the Department of Revenue certifies equalized values for property. DPI does a certification of state aid and also provides private school voucher deductions. So the notice that was put out in the paper 2 weeks ago, I had to put it out there, actually sent it to the paper 3 weeks ago. That was using the preliminary budget data. So if anybody looked at that notice, they will notice that there's differences between what we put in the preliminary budget versus what we're going to talk about tonight. But everything that's going to be presented tonight will has all the new information that's finalized and received, and will be reflected in every number that we present and talk about tonight. So I just wanted to clarify that. So now I get to make my annual joke about putting the fun in fund accounting, right? So I do want to just for anybody who's viewing, streaming, I think everybody in the audience has probably heard this spiel a little bit before, but for anybody who's new online that's watching this, I think it's important to recognize that school districts we have to use fund accounting that's defined by DPI. And basically the general principle is that each fund has its separate purpose, or there's certain rules within each fund. I highlighted 2 in blue on this slide, the general fund, Fund 10, and Fund 27, which is special education, because those are the 2 most common funds and probably the ones that have the most activity throughout the fiscal year. But we do have, in total, we have 8 funds. I think there's 23 or 22 funds in total that DPI allows. Luckily, we don't have all of those because it gets complicated. Just quickly mentioning Fund 21, that's where we typically put in donations or gifts. Last year we got a big donation from the PTO, so that was most of the revenue coming in or out. In general, if we do any fundraising or receive any donations that are going to be used in the current year, we just generally do that in Fund 10 because there's really no benefit to doing it in 21. Fund 21, though, does allow you to carry balances forward. So if it's something that's fundraising over a multi-year period, or there's a donation that's meant to be used over many years, that's when we would put it in Fund 21. Fund 38 and Fund 39, those are the 2 debt funds. So 38 is the non-referendum debt. That is what we used for our energy efficiency project a while back in 2015. So we're still paying that off. And then Fund 39 is where the debt for our current referendum that's involved in our renovations and the project that's going on right now, that's where that's accounting for in Fund 39 because it had to be approved by referendum. And then 46 is our long-term capital improvement fund. That's the fund that we started, I think, 7 years ago. Essentially what we've been doing is anytime we had a surplus at the end of a year, we've been putting some money away for long-term projects. I think here in the coming months, we'll be revisiting our long-term capital improvement plan as now that we've kind of identified a lot of things in the referendum project. Now we got to kind of see what kind of projects are coming up in the next 10 years. And then Fund 49 is where all the expenditures for the current referendum project are being kept. And then Fund 50 is our food service fund. And so, like I mentioned, each fund has its own purpose, but for most of the conversation tonight, we'll be just talking about Funds 10 and 27. So one question that I get a lot, and the way I'm going to go, this presentation will work, is we'll kind of talk about revenue limits and tax levies, because ultimately at the end of this, there will be a motion on the tax levy. But then we'll hop back into like revenues and expenditures, and then we'll finish off back with the tax levy. But one of the first questions I get is, well, where does the school district get its money from? And the answer is most of it is coming from property tax and general state aid. And together those comprise 81% of our total Fund 10 budget. The rest of the Fund 10 budget is coming from, there's per pupil categorical state aid. So I think we get $742 per student. So that's that 5% gray bar in the graph. And then the remaining revenue comes from federal grants, mainly Title I. Currently we have ESSER. And then the other portion would be open enrollment, money we get from other districts. When their students from other districts come here, they send us open enrollment payments, and that's that yellow part of the graph. Actually, in normal times, when there's no ESSER money, that amount between the property tax levy and general state aid is closer to 90% of our revenue. So I think after this year, it'll kind of go back down to normal once our ESSER funds expire at the end of this fiscal year. So then, just kind of explaining revenue limits, because I think it's an important topic. How are they calculated? So in 1993, the state legislature instituted a limit on revenue for school districts. So that revenue limit is the maximum amount that a school district can raise through a tax levy for Funds 10 and 38 and 41. We don't have Fund 41. Through state aid and property tax. And it's really complicated. There's a big worksheet that you have to download from DPI, but essentially the calculation, I try to summarize it as simply as possible on the bottom. You take your resident membership, so those are the students, and so that includes just your residents. So you take your student count, then you subtract out all the open enrolled kids, and then you add in the students that are residents here but open enroll elsewhere. So you take your membership and we convert that into an FTE number. So for the most part, students are considered a full-time 1.0 FTE, but 4K is only 0.6 of an FTE and 3K is only 0.5 of an FTE. So we convert that into an FTE number. Then there's a per pupil dollar amount. So you multiply those two numbers, you get a large number in the millions, and then you add any one-time or non-recurring exemptions. And once you get through that formula, you get your revenue limit. And so then the next slide, oh, actually, can you go back one? Sorry.
To this one?
Or one ahead, sorry.
Yeah, that's
So when the revenue limits were first instituted in the 93-94 school year, they were based on the prior year spending. I think this is an important thing to reiterate because it's going to come up again potentially when our operating referendum expires. But they were based on the prior year student spending. So they looked at the 1992-93 school year, and at that time, Salem's per student spending was below the state average. And so with that revenue limit formula, this has persisted throughout time, and we are still a low revenue school district. So that's why, people are like, well, why do you have to go to an operating referendum? It's because we're a low revenue district. And the reason we're a low revenue district is because we happen to be low on our per student spending back in the 92-93 school year. So if we go to the next slide, on this graph here, I put all the local K-8s on here. I think Trever-Wilmot was kind of a newer district, so they weren't around in 93-94, but you can see where everybody's revenue limit per member was at that point in time. And Salem was all the way on the far right in blue. We're the lowest per member district in the area at that time.
And it's never been adjusted for inflation or costs or.
So this was kind of the starting point, and then every year, not every year, most years, the state increases the per pupil amount, but they increase it the same amount for everybody. So like this, we kind of started behind, and we've always stayed behind. Over time, that amount becomes less and less as the overall, our per member amount is 11,000 this year, so it's more than double what it was in 93-94. But we're still on the bottom, and without our operating referendum, we would still be on the bottom. So. And at the bottom of this slide, I put in red, that's the reason why we have those the operating referendum that we typically go up for every 3 years. So then, you might be wondering, well, how is the revenue limit calculated? I kind of explained it a couple slides ago, but just kind of putting some current numbers to it. So for the 23-24 school year, our membership FTE actually decreased. So we were previously at 1,059, and it decreased down to 1,020. So that's for the current year. And so some people might say, well, I thought we had less than 1,000 students, but just remember that this is membership, so it's only looking at your residents, not the number of students you actually have in your building. But the revenue limit formula actually uses a 3-year average because they don't want like 1-year blips to kind of shake everything out of place. So our 3-year average also dropped. But you can see, even though the current year FTE dropped by 39 students, the 3-year average only dropped by 8 students. So, essentially it dropped by 1/3 of that. Mm-hmm. So in 2019, that was when we hit our peak in membership. And then we kind of had the COVID pandemic. Most districts saw a big hit. We did as well. And so then, I think most districts thought, well, that was a one-time blip, we're going to improve. We actually saw a slight bump up in the 21-22 year, and then the last 2 years we've seen slight decreases, and actually this year was a little bit bigger of a decrease. We will be talking about the pupil count at the regular board meeting as well, but just know that this is not only a regional issue with membership dropping, but it's a statewide issue. I think over 75% of districts, closer to 80%, are seeing declining enrollment. And most of the districts around here, especially the K-8s, they saw large 8th grade classes leave and move on to high school, and they were replaced by smaller than normal 4K classes. And so we'll revisit the topic a little bit later. The other pieces of the revenue limit, and I think these are some positive news, is that per pupil amount, last year we were at 10,000, which was the lowest it could be. We were a low revenue district, as I mentioned. so the state this year, they gave all districts a $325 revenue limit per pupil increase. Which if you're at 10,000, that's only 3.25%. And we all know inflation is higher than that amount. But fortunately, they did increase the low revenue ceiling. So there's a minimum amount that every district will get. And we were at the minimum before, 10,000. They increased that to 11,000. So we got the $325 increase, and then we got $675 additionally per student to get us up to that 1,000. So we're still at 11,000 per member, and that's the lowest possible a district can get in the state. But we did get a larger bump than most districts did. I think there was 28 or 29 low revenue districts, and we're one of them. So.
And how long will that stay?
So that stays moving forward,
that
and then next year the revenue limit per pupil increase will increase again by. Now I'm blanking what it is, but it's at least 325.
Okay.
I think it's a little bit more, but I'll bring that up again later in the year. Anything from you, Nick? No? And then the last piece is those non-recurring exemptions. So we do, as I mentioned, we're in the second year of our current 3-year referendum. So next year will be the last year, and then we'll have to go out potentially again. We do get 2 other little exemptions. I shouldn't say they're little, they're several tens of thousands of dollars. One is the hold harmless exemption, which we've gotten in the past whenever your enrollment declines and you have less revenue than the year before, the state kind of keeps you whole, because their theory is even if you lose 3 kids, that's usually not enough to cut a teacher or a position, so they kind of keep you whole from the previous year. But because the low revenue ceiling got bumped by that $1,000, we actually have more revenue than we had last year, so we lost that exemption. But we do get a declining enrollment exemption, so if your enrollment's declining, which ours declined by 8 FTE on the 3-year average, we get 8 times the revenue limit per pupil member, or per member amount, so 8 times 11,000, and we got $88,000 through that exemption. But it's much less than the 1.5 million recurring exemption. So I put this slide on here just to kind of put some numbers to it. If anybody wants to go back and watch this, they can kind of see how the numbers flow. I'm not going to go into too much detail, just kind of going, looking at the big picture. As I mentioned, you get the revenue limit amount based on that previous formula. Then you subtract out the state aid, which includes, well, we call it equalization aid, but it includes general state aid, computer aid, and personal property aid. Those last 2 are very small amounts. And then you're left with your revenue limit tax levy amount, and those are for funds 10 and 38. And then you take that number and you add in if you have any referendum approved debt, which we do. We have that Fund 39 debt. So we levy that payment. And then you add those 2 numbers together, and that's how the total levy is calculated.
Is there a difference with half day and full day?
For no, they both qualify for the maximum 0.6. Really, what it comes down to is you have to meet a minimum hour requirement,
Right.
And then beyond that, you get no financial benefit from any. Even if we had full day 3K, every day of the week, it would still be 0.6.
0.5 or so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then kind of bringing it back to how we're going to end, and then we'll jump into some other things. So we have the total property tax levy. That's that big number, the $7,788,031. You divide that by the total equalized property value within the district boundaries, which is over $1 billion. And then you multiply that number by 1,000, and you get your mill rate, which is the amount per $1,000 of property value that you'll be paying in property taxes for the school district. So for a $400,000 home, you'd be paying $2,328 towards the Salem School District property tax. So, any questions so far on that? That's kind of just a review of stuff from.
What percentage do you think of schools in the state of Wisconsin are being funded by a referendum?
That number is dramatically increased.
Yeah, I can put it, we were just talking about that.
Yeah.
I want to say it's.
I just think as you're like saying this out loud, how crazy this formula sounds to like any person, like anybody who like funds business. Like back in 1992, like we had this crazy idea, and now everybody's stuck with
We've
it
never
across the
changed
state.
it.
Has there been any discussion at the state level of opening up this jar a little bit more and changing some of the equation?
I think there has, so,
Like the funding formula.
yeah, so to answer your question, I think it's at least 35 to 40% of districts, maybe even more, and that number's growing.
Yeah.
Like, I think last spring there was 88 or 90 districts,
Referendums.
and there's about 420 districts in the state. So if they go out every 3 years, I mean, maybe there's 270 districts out of the 420 that.
You wrote letters in support of everything, right? And what is their response? I would assume people advocating for public schools were bringing this up. Was there a response? Check out what they think about it or
Well,
a
so.
justification?
Yeah, I think most politicians will say that they did increase funding for schools, and they did it later on. Will hit the school tax levy credit. But what that does is it doesn't really provide additional dollars. What it does is it provides funding, but all it does is offset property taxes. So the total amount doesn't change. It's just the proportion that comes from state aid goes up, and the amount that comes from property taxes decreases.
And I think that's a great question, and I think that's a conversation we're gonna need to keep having, is because in the papers, it looks very much like the narrative out there is, we've funded education so well, and I wanna speak kindly about this, but it didn't necessarily. It didn't answer the questions for special education. It's not enough. Like I would say most districts in the state of Wisconsin are either going or are already living in a referendum. So like you're never not thinking about it.
All the time.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
and I think people feel that like referendum fatigue, and I know we've talked about it
Yeah.
as a board, but I like the schools that aren't going for a referendum. I'm curious, like what they do.
Well, they might get other donations or funding, just depending on what area they're in or what relationships they have.
And there were some districts that were more than double what we were in '93. So I mean, they have a little more money to work with.
Like in '93, they're at where we're at right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is a remedy to this for some school districts is that if you consolidate, do you get to rewrite that number?
That is a good question. I think somebody asked that once before, and I still don't remember the number. But I would imagine, like True Wilmot didn't exist in '93, '94, and I
If you
don't.
open up a brand new school, you get to treat that like
A
brand new setting the bar, essentially.
And maybe
Yeah,
that,
you know, and I don't know about other board members, but I sometimes am asked the question, will at some point, and that's one of those open-ended questions, will at some point, or should we at some point in this area look at consolidation? And that's one of the big issues, is that, yeah, you know, it sounds interesting where there would just be one superintendent, but what's that going to do to the tax levy? And you know, each individual person's taxes they pay. How is that going to change?
It's crazy that you guys are having this conversation. I brought this up with the area superintendents 2 weeks ago, just saying not that I'm looking to like get myself out of a job, but I am currently forcing our communities to compete against us, against Central, against Bristol, like, because there's kids that we overlap in areas, and so it probably feels like to some of the people with our zip code, like, we're going to a referendum again, and then people are failing, and then we're just watching it. That impacts staff, that impacts kids. Poor John, like he's trying to figure out like, when are you going to go to referendum again? Like, we've got to make sure I do it in a way that I'm not going to.
we have to stagger
Yeah,
it.
it's
And it's
staggered.
not. I don't. And to me, I feel like if because I know we're going to have to go back for another operating referendum. I can't, in good faith, not have at least brought that conversation up. Like, we're bleeding the community out if I don't bring up that. Like, have we ever thought about it? And I do what, you know, the board can do what it needs to do. The boards can do what they need to do. But I just.
Although
see
the voters vote on whether they wish to consolidate in each of those school districts, you know, the two high schools and all the elementary districts that are in our immediate area.
I know that there's funding at the state level to explore that, because they're seeing how much shared services costs, how much we're asking some districts with one superintendent to do HR, to do budget, to do student services, and it's to scale. They have the same demands, but they're doing everything. And so then, oh, well, shit, people keep asking us Sharon Marquez, and I'm like, I'm not Sharon Marquez. But that's because there's the need, like everybody, like, so, but there isn't, the state is willing to help offset some of that, just if and not that I think it's the only answer, but that is something I have had to ask myself as up at night thinking about what's about to happen. We're gonna have to go to a referendum.
That's going to be the lifeblood of this school forever. And I think the idea of trying to go to a reoccurring referendum has been scary to a degree, because we probably could try that once, but the next year we get
may need it.
1 year,
Yep.
and then the next year is probably just going to go to a 3-year again,
Yep.
just so we don't lose the funding.
Yep.
But then we get rid of our 1-year cushion on that. So when do we place that bet as the tough topic, right? So I don't know. To Steve's point, I've gotten asked a lot in times, and I'm not saying this is necessarily the situation or the time to talk about that, but to your point though, Vicki, I believe that you look at what happened at some of the other school districts in the area and how drastic. Look at Wilmot just recently and the situation over there. I mean, that impacts the community, not just that school.
Correct.
And then you start thinking about the morale moving forward and the teaching staff and the people in that school district and how they're able to look at that as a career path and secure place to send their kids or work at.
Yep.
I mean, it totally bombs the whole energy out of the school. And that's last year or 2 years ago. I mean, we're at the will of 200 votes for having the same, and less on the one for operating.
Yes. Yeah.
It was 97 votes for us to have a similar situation,
Yeah.
right? So,
Right, and then also, in the state of Iowa, the state legislature voted a number of years ago to force the very, very, very small school districts, high schools that would have a graduating class of 12, to force them to consolidate. And, I'm hopeful that our legislature does not do that here, and I doubt whether it would. But, with those issues, who
our
knows?
situation is just so unique in this part of Wisconsin. I can't say we run like a very rural county, and we are rural to a degree, right? But we're kind of metropolitan in a sense because we're in between. And this ends up being kind of it's just a very interesting thing. I wonder if there's another district area similar to ours in the state other than just us.
There's like the Lake Country out in western Waukesha that has caves.
similar to
and
this.
and then northern Milwaukee County has.
They're like that too.
But those are the only two pockets in the
Yeah, so it's very interesting. And
Well, you talked about the automatic reset that went into place with Trevor Wilmot. When Wilmot finally decided we just can't make a go of it, so Trevor and Wilmot consolidated, all of a sudden they got a reset. I don't know, did we miss an opportunity with Salem Lakes? I mean, Salem and Silver Lake are now supposedly one town, but we still have one village, but we still have two separate school districts.
I will let you know, so when I brought up the conversation to the other superintendents, again, just because I wasn't sleeping, had to put it out there, more to hey, do people not talk about? There's an interest. There's interest now, I think, because of what we're starting. When you see the declining enrollment, we don't see all of a sudden things just the ship turning the other direction. And then with so many in our cohort in this area, their failed referendum, there's a conversation that other people are willing to have. I just don't think anyone, I just didn't know, so I just asked the question. But it it generated a very good conversation of should we talk about it? Could we talk about it?
do you believe the realistic fear of it is at an administrative level, what that could be to those school districts moving forward for the career paths for some people in those districts? Is that the real reason, to some degree, you believe that maybe this hasn't been pressed too hard, because that'd be the true impact to some degree?
I mean, honestly, it could be, but that's where I don't think I could have.
Right, that's impossible.
Yeah, and I just think if I were a taxpayer here and I was thinking if I lived here and my superintendent didn't say, I've tried everything before, I'm asking you for more money again. I've even tried to discuss consolidation where I might not have a job. I don't think I would be okay with that. I would want someone to tell me that I did everything I could, even if it meant I'm going to have to.
Doesn't necessarily mean you wouldn't have a job.
Who knows? I don't know, but.
If the
boards too.
Yeah.
I mean, is the other school board gonna give up some of their power, and are we gonna give us
I
some
think
of
some
our
of the,
power?
I
and
think some of the
consolidate boards?
uh-oh-ness is related to KOSD and how some of the functionality recently has gone. And, you know, you look, when you get to super consolidation, what does that really look like? Do you really have control of what happens in the schools, right? So there's got to be a median point to it.
Right, and then you have states like Florida, which they have county-wide school districts, and other states are moving towards that as well now.
Yeah.
But again, the bottom line is, Nick, as you were just saying, you know, the individual taxpayer, individual property owner, or someone living in an apartment, their rent will go up if taxes go up for the owner of the building. And that's what people are concerned about, and we have every right to be concerned about that, in my opinion.
Do you think you can get through the rest of this?
You have 10
Again,
minutes.
Sorry.
You got it.
No worries.
Sorry, I took us left.
All right, so to just kind of review or go over our Fund 10 revenue and expense, then we'll go over all the funds real quick. Our Fund 10 revenue summary, I have all the numbers up here if anybody wants to go back and look at the presentation, but really the two numbers I wanted to highlight with significant amount changes are the property tax, the state aid, the general aid, those first two columns. Those went up, and obviously that's because of the revenue limit increase. Because if you have 1,000 kids and it goes up $1,000, that's $1 million. That's that increase right there. And then the federal amount went down because last year at this time, the governor announced this back to school supplemental aid, and we also got the Get Kids Ahead money. And both of those did not happen this year, so that's where that change occurred. So overall, the net increase for Fund 10 revenue, $683,000, which is about 4.5%. I've already talked about these ones on a different slide, but I'm just kind of reviewing what changed on the revenue side. Revenue or resident membership FTE declined. Revenue limit went up. The per pupil amount went up, and then the non-recurring exemptions, we lost the hold harmless, but increased our declining enrollment. So there was a little change there. On the expense side, and so the way I'm presenting these is the same way that we present our monthly revenue and expense reports, just so that it's consistent. On the Fund 10 expense side of things, obviously the two big changes typically that occur every year are salary and benefits. Those make up the bulk of our expenses. Salaries went up. I think we ended the bargaining with our unions. A little over 4.5% with teachers and 6.5% for our hourly support staff. Additionally, we added some stipends. We've added a couple positions, and then the benefits. Even though health insurance went down, which is a big chunk of our benefits, we do pay FICA and WRS. So FICA is Medicare and Social Security amounts. Those are tied to the salary amount, so as the salary goes up, those automatically go up as well. So those are the two big increases overall on the Fund 10 expense side, 7.11%. You'll notice that this expense went up more than the revenue, because actually last year we ended with a slight surplus, but this year we're budgeted again in a balanced budget. So just kind of highlighting those expense changes again. We did change our administrative structure a little bit. We went from 2 principals to 1. We added a director of teaching and learning. We used to have 3 student support positions, and we've now have 2 assistant principals. We kind of shrunk that a little bit. We did add a project lead the way elective class, and then we added a school psych position as well. And then I mentioned the wage increases, insurance, health insurance decreased 3%. Our dental went up a little bit, but dental is much smaller than health insurance. And then obviously inflationary pressure across the board. Most of our services, supplies, and things have gone up, 4% approximately, 5% in some cases. So that's in there as well. If we go to the next slide, we got the Fund 10 budget summary. So this is just kind of looking in total. Our beginning fund balance for the year is $3.5 million. As I mentioned, we have a balanced budget, so there should be no change in fund balance if everything went according to the budget plans. Usually it never goes according to plan 100%, but you will notice last year we did finish the year with a 24% fund balance, and so that's expressed as a percentage of your expenditures. This year, that number is projected to go down because our fund balance is staying the same, but our expenditures are going up. So I know we've tried to move towards not having to short-term borrow. We're getting close. Hopefully this year we can make it. If anything, it's going to be less than we borrowed the last 2 years, which is a good thing because interest rates went up as well. I think last year we paid a little over $1,000 for borrowing the $300,000, but this year that number would be double probably. So trying to be efficient with that, so we don't have to pay any interest cost. And then looking at all the funds, so this one now includes funds 10 through 50. We've already gone over 10, so I won't talk about that one. 21's pretty small, but really the difference there is I'm not projecting another $10,000 donation from PTO, but maybe there might be something else coming. Fund 27, I do want to point out that that's projected to increase. We do have some students with high needs. We have one student we pay for tuition for, and then so that is a factor because if the Fund 27 amount goes up, the aid amount only went up by 3%. As you can see, the expenses are projected to go up by 20%. So that difference has to come from Fund 10 through a transfer, which is then shown at the bottom in those interfund transfer amounts. 38 didn't really change much. I think it went down a little over $1,000. 39 is the referendum approved debt. That dropped off significantly, and the number last year was overinflated because of the refinancing we did. We had that short bond anticipatory note for $18.3 million. Fund 46, we are projecting to use some of that to offset potentially some of the referendum project. As I mentioned, we'll have to revisit our long-term capital improvement plan here in the coming months. Fund 49, which is where the referendum expenses and revenues are budgeted. That you can see last year we just broke ground in June, so most of that was architectural fees and some construction, but really the bulk of our referendum project is going to be expended this year. That's that $15 million amount. And then because there will be work done in July and August, that'll be a new fiscal year, so the last remaining bit of the referendum funds will be spent next fiscal year. Food service, we are projected to have a loss in that. The expenses are going up, revenues are going up as well, but not as much. We did end the year with a $283,000 fund balance in food service. So DPI then requires you to have a plan to spend that down. One plan that you can use is by keeping food prices the same as the previous year. So you essentially take a loss, but then you're just eating away at that fund balance. We're still supposed to have a very healthy fund balance in Fund 50, but that's why food prices, we kept the meal prices the same this year. Though next year we might have to look at it again, depending on how things are looking. So any questions on all funds? No? And then the last piece here, tax levy, bringing it back to where we kind of started the conversation with the revenue limit and tax levy. Revenue limit, tax levy is projected or is budgeted here at 5.6 million. Plus we add the Fund 39 debt service at 2.1 million for a total school-based tax levy of $7,788,031. That's a 4.73% increase in the total levy. Equalized values, so the property values within the district boundaries increased by 10%. So our expenses, or the tax levy increased by 4.7%, the equalized value increased by 10%. You take the levy divided by the equalized value to get your mill rate. So because the equalized value increased by a greater rate than the levy amount, the mill rate is dropping as well. So you can see over the last, from the 21-22 year to the current year, we've gone down by more than $1 on the mill rate. So that's a 4.75% drop from the previous year. And then the last two pieces. So last year we did a defeasance in Fund 39. That's just a fancy way of saying we prepaid debt. So this budget that I presented tonight does have over levy amount for defeasance. Last year we over levied $565,000. This year it's only $250,000 because I still wanted to make sure we could have a decrease across the board. So the mill rate's dropping by 5.82 with that $250,000 over levy. And so you might be asking, well, why would we want to do this? And there's a few benefits. One, it reduces interest costs over the next 11 years. Two, it provides mill rate flexibility in future years. So when we go out for a referendum, we could just drop this and no longer to fees in the future, and then that'll help our mill rate drop even more or keep it level. And then it lowers our payment in the final year. Because we over levied $565,000 last year and $250,000 this year, we're a little about $250,000 away from eliminating our final year payment. So it's just kind of like prepaying your mortgage or anything else. It just frees up money in the future and saves you in interest. And I did demonstrate this last year using these peak and valleys. So what we're trying to avoid is having a drop in the mill rate and then it going up. And so that blue line is kind of where I think we're trying to get to a smooth, consistent mill rate and do it in a way that doesn't really have those peaks and valleys. So that's the purpose of that Fund 39 over levy. And then the last piece I wanted to talk about was the school levy tax credit. So this is something that's been around for a long time, since the 1996-97 fiscal year, but it really has gotten a lot of attention this year. So the state considers the school levy tax credit to be part of the state's commitment to funding education, but it is not paid directly to schools, and it's given to the municipalities, who then apply it to each individual property tax bill. So I kind of alluded to this earlier, where I said the headlines say state funding for education has increased to an all-time high, but really it's not additional dollars that we have, it's just the funds are offsetting property taxes, which, I think is a positive thing as well. But I did want to bring it up because unlike equalization aid, which gives districts with low property values more money, the school levy tax credit works the other way, and it gives districts with high property values more money. So it would have benefited us more if this would have all been put into equalization aid, but obviously it didn't work out that way. And then this was kind of historic because for this budget, the 2023-25 biennial state budget, they actually appropriated more money into the school levy tax credit than they did into equalization aid. So it's kind of a roundabout way to give people a tax break because it's really confusing on the property tax bill, and it also doesn't show up in our finances because it's not given to us. And then on the last slide I have of the night, I just want to go over how this impacts our levy. So the green line, line A on this, is our total tax levy. As I mentioned, that's projected to go up 4.73%. In the past, we talked about mill rates a lot, but I think more districts are now starting to talk about the levy amount, because mill rates are nice when property values are pretty consistent year to year, but we've had property values like skyrocket over the last 2-3 years or 4 years. So when we look at the levy, right, the levy is increasing by 4.73%. The school levy tax credit is increasing by, and I'm doing this conservatively, I'm only estimating 75% of the school levy tax credit because I want to make sure I'm not lying or it eventually doesn't come out this way. The school levy tax credit doesn't get finalized till November, so we don't even know what that amount is, but they can estimate it pretty accurately. So I'm only using 75% of the estimated increase, but that's supposed to go up by $260,000. So when you subtract the total tax levy, the school tax levy credit from the total tax levy, really the net levy is only going up by $91,000, which is a 1.48% increase. Then the other piece that has come up a lot is net new construction. So if there's new property that wasn't in existence last year's property taxes, this year they help spread out the property tax levy increase can be spread out to these new properties. And so the total value of that net new construction and the impact that would have on the levy is $118,000. So when you subtract that from the net levy, you're actually looking at the average taxpayer having a tax impact of negative 0.36. So not only does the mill rate go down, the rate at which they're getting taxed, but the total amount of the levy goes down as well. So Salem's portion of property taxes on the average person's tax bill will actually be less than it was last year. So it's really kind of complicated because it's outside of our mill rate and our levy, but I did want to present that. So, and I say average taxpayer because some taxpayers, if their house went up 25%, might see a slight increase, but in some people who had a smaller increase would see a greater savings as well. Yeah, but on average, the average taxpayer is going to see us pay less in school property taxes for Salem.
For Salem.
For Salem, when you factor in the tax levy, school levy tax credit, and net new construction. And I do plan to go over property tax bills because unfortunately, the way our property tax bills work is that the school levy tax credit is only applied to Central's tax levy. So it looks like their levy is very small compared to ours. But I'll go over that in the future. I'll do a session.
It applies to all of us, but
Yep. So I'll show you how to read the property tax bill and how it all works back to this.
You're not doing that tonight.
No.
that's the next 20
No,
slides he
I
has.
know. It's important though.
So any questions? I know I went over a lot here at the last second.
I'd like to make a comment. Since this is a combination of two meetings, we're trying this for the first time, to only go over about 5 minutes is impressive. Yeah. I know I talked about a minute and a half, so, I'll take credit for that, but, no, it's hard not to delve deeply into things in a meeting like this, but all things considered, this isn't bad.
And there's about 4 more items before you get and end this one.
Oh, yeah,
Yes.
actually, you're
I
right.
have to do a written ballot on this.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay, we're almost there, though.
Yes.
Do you now need to say words?
I do.
Are you on 10? Is that where we are? Oh, is that this? I
Yep.
see. Okay, sorry. Words, there you go.
Yes.
So somebody needs to make a motion, I think, right?
Yep, I need a motion regarding the tax levy for the 23-24.
Mr. Chairperson, I move there be a levy of a school tax assessed against all taxable properties within the district of the sum of $7,788,031, which includes a general fund 10 levy of $5,567,823 necessary to operate and maintain the district school system and finance the recommended budget for the 23-24 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. We need to vote via ballot.
Just us.
Yep. I don't know. Does anybody else live in the district?
Nope.
No? Okay.
I can just do this, it's fine.
And, I'm gonna have,
Pen.
Nicole, Nick, Jack, can you count and tabulate?
Sure.
I was wondering if there was a situation in which it was just the board members, we could just do a roll call vote at that point. It says it should be recommended. It doesn't necessarily is necessary.
This will take an extra minute.
The 3 residents were,
So is it a layperson can read it then?
No, I just appointed the three of you.
Oh, okay.
who were the 3 residents?
Nicole,
Nicole, you can open
Nick
them.
and Jack.
then you can stand and watch you open them. I
You're
guess.
taking all this stuff.
That's true.
Yes. 2 yeses. 3 yeses.
This is exciting.
Democracy at work.
4 yeses. 5 yeses.
All right.
Motion carries 5-0.
We gotta do the,
All right, can,
no, the other business.
yep. Are there any conversations that needed to be had about the current board salary of $200 per regular meeting? So last year we moved it from 100 to 200. Can I
Go
have,
where it is.
can I have a motion?
Motion that we currently accept the board receiving $200 per regular meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Oh, I thought you were like waving me down for something. All right, regarding reimbursement of mileage for board members, currently we're reimbursed at the standard IRS mileage rate.
I motion that we currently use the IRS standard mileage rate for board reimbursement.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. And then next year's annual meeting date, and I think we would adopt the same format. I feel like it went pretty well for 2024.
Need a motion?
Yes, I need a motion. We would, if we went with the same corresponding date next year, it looks like it would be October 22nd of
Motion that
2024.
we assign the annual / budget meeting for next year, October 22nd, 2024.
Second.
At what time?
I didn't put a time this time, only because.
With time to be determined.
Yeah, only because this one, because we put a time on it, it made it all kind of, I had to start things at a certain,
Okay.
yeah.
And who?
I second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved. I move to adjourn the meeting at 7:10 PM Central Daylight Time.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Thank you so much, everyone. Steve, myself, Nicole, Nick, thank you so much for being here tonight. Administration, Vicky Marquez, Patty, Christy, Kate. All right, and we have lots of special guests today. So any visitors, please make sure that you have signed in, and please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. One of the best parts of the night.
Thank you again for having us.
You guys introduce your name to us. We have a whole.
My name is Nick. My name is Nolan.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Start salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks,
Thanks,
gentlemen.
boys.
Thank you.
Love a man in uniform.
All right, can I please have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move that we approve the agenda as presented.
So moved?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Thank you so much. I actually have nothing to report on this month. Again, we just had an amazing annual meeting, so thank you for everybody who is participating here and remote. Steve?
I have nothing to report for either the clerk's report or CISA. Everything's going well with CISA, and we had the meeting last week, so it went well. Thank you.
So much. And I'm going to turn it over to Nicole to share the treasurer's report.
All right. Let me just make sure I have the right one here. Sorry, Marquez. All right, the consent agenda items, right?
Yep.
All right. The first of 6 special education aid payments, this one? Yep.
Oh, I just emailed you. So those are my notes,
Oh, okay.
and then there's the other one. I just emailed it again.
Okay,
too, though.
perfect. All right, got it. Okay, I'd like to present the treasurer's report dated September 2023. I'll read the ending balance for each of our accounts. CSB operating account with a balance of $457,400.41. CSB flex account with a balance of $35,407.80. Petty cash with a balance of $300. LGIP with a balance of $2,008,941.59. WISC with a balance of $18,173,629.22 for a grand cash and investment asset total of $20,675,679.02 and a Fund 10 and 27 asset total of $2,207,902.93. Payment of accounts payable bills dated September 1st through September 30th, 2023. This includes paper checks numbered 72105 to 72157, wire transfer checks numbered 2023-00166 to 2023-00339, and ACH checks numbered 2324-00012 to 2324-00029 for a total of $5,150,132.04.
And I'll present the monthly revenue and expense report. So for the month of this is through September 30th, we've received a total of 6.72% of our revenue. We're on pace from the revenue limit perspective. We did get our first aid payment from the state in September. We are down a little bit relative to last year, and I mentioned that at the annual meeting. Last year at this time, the governor gave that back-to-school supplemental aid, which we did not have this year, so that is the real difference between this point last year on the revenue side. On the expense side of things, we're through 15.43% of our budget. That's pretty much on pace with last year. The big difference is last year, this year, we did our first round of VEBA, or formerly our HSA payments. We did that in September, whereas we typically did the first round in January. And we did that to line up with our new plan year for health insurance. So you can see the benefit amount is higher than it was last year at this point, and that's really the big difference between this point last year. Any questions on revenue and expenses?
Or any questions for Nicole from the treasurer's report? No. And then we also have the minutes of the regular school board meeting from September 26, 2023. Can I please have a motion regarding the consent agenda items?
I move to approve the consent agenda items A through D as presented.
So moved. Second. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. I believe there are no public comments this evening, and so I will turn it over to you, Vicki, to talk about Third Friday count.
Okay, I'm actually gonna.
Turn it over to Marquez.
We're gonna tandem this. Go ahead.
Okay, cool. So, Third Friday count is what occurs every year in September on the third Friday. This year it fell on September 15th. And a lot of people were like, whoa, this is only the second Friday. But that's because the first Friday was before school started. So it's actually the third Friday of September, not the third Friday of the school year. And so at this point, this is what we use for the revenue limit calculation. And so I think we have 3 slides here. The first one shows our head count, or the actual students in the building. So you can see the total for this September 15th, 2023 count was 956 students. So that includes open enrollment students. There are 93 students open enrolling in. So what you have to do for the revenue limit calculation is you take the total enrollment or head count, the 956, you subtract out your open enrollment students, which are the 93. And then if you go to the next slide, you add back in what are called resident additions. So these are students that either open enroll out or attend a tuition-based school outside of the district. And so that total was 190 students. So you add that back in. And then you go to the next slide and you get actually I'm showing the comparison between last year and this year. You get the total number, which was 1,052 students, and which is a drop of 42 students from last year's membership count, which was 1,094. But then, as I mentioned before, that number is then calculated into an FTE number, which prorates the 3K at 0.5 of a student, 4K at 0.6 of a student, and then everybody else is 1.0. So that's that number on the bottom, and that's actually what's used in the revenue limit calculation is the FTE number. We saw a decrease of 38 there from 1,058.7 last year down to 1,020.4 this year. And then the revenue limit uses a 3-year average, so then it wasn't that full drop that we faced. We actually saw a decline of 8 in the 3-year average.
Just a quick question on this
Yep.
slide. So like those kindergartners in 22-23, the 100
Yep.
is not, just to make sure I'm reading this right, is the 105
Yep.
of first grade. Okay.
Yep, and we typically pick up students from like 4K to 5K. 4K is not required. Though obviously some years that number is a little higher than it was this year. And then you can see our 4K class this year was only 74, which is lower than it was last year, which was 83.
And we lost a big 8th grade
Yep.
group as well.
Yep. Yeah, you can see last year's 8th grade was 125, and this year's only 105. So those are really the two points that caused that decline.
And, do you have more on that?
The final slide just shows the
Okay.
current year, but yeah.
And so what, like Marquez and I have been talking with our teams about, we talked with other districts about as well. So he gave you the regional area, but in the nation, it's like enrollment down 2%. So it's not just here, it's happening across the nation. Just this, we have some smaller numbers of students who are going to public school, so more in homeschool, and then there's a population people just don't know where they are. They're just not being accounted for. It's one of the things that we're trying to do to address this decline, because our open enrollment out, even though it's a number I don't like, it's not as high. It didn't take a big of hit as it has. we're now trying to find ways to be more innovative with our families who are homeschooled. So what can we do to start offering virtual options, kind of going back to that board policy a few months ago that was passed on being creative with those options. So can I address homeschool students, find a way to get them to at least call us their home to bring back some money. So we're trying to be innovative and trying to be creative to find solutions to support our families if they want to choose to have homeschool options. Are there a way that we can partner with them in that? So,
Is there also just a birth rate decline?
and that's the other piece.
Yep.
Yep.
So just to throw a couple other numbers out there, the state as a whole saw a 3.2% drop in enrollment from last year to this year. So that's across the state, which is actually a drop of over 9,000 students. And then if you look at the last 5 years, so if you compare 5 years ago to the present day, we actually have 48,712 less students in the state. And declining birth rate is the main cause, followed by increase in homeschool, and then there's like this missing student population that has occurred since the pandemic. So there's, a fraction or a percentage of that is students who just
Aren't showing up.
didn't return to school after the pandemic.
And they don't know where they went. Sorry, so you said the 48,000 was in the last 5 years?
5 years, the state has
so-
lost 48,000 students. We have 48,000 less students now. Yep. And so the final slide here, I just
Yeah.
am showing the current year, no longer the comparison.
Right.
But so then we do have to submit these numbers to DPI. These are part of the audit. So when the auditors come, they confirm that these numbers are correct. But we do need the board approval for this every year.
I move to approve the third Friday count for the 2023-24 school year as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries.
All right, and so now we actually have to approve the budget again at the regular board meeting. But rather than go into detail again and bore everybody in the audience, I'll just do, I did provide the numbers on there again. So if anybody wants to go back to this presentation and pause the video, they can review the revenue and expense numbers, but it's the exact same information we went over a few minutes ago. Fund 10 revenue summary, overall increase of 4.47% in Fund 10 revenue. On the expense side, we're looking at a 7.11% increase in expenses. And the difference there is that last year we ended with more revenue than we had expenses. So this year we're projecting a balanced budget. When you look at the budget as a whole, as I mentioned, present a $15,981,044 balanced budget. So that's the same number in revenue and expenses. So we're projecting the fund balance to remain at $3.5 million. Which is well above our 15% fund balance policy. On the all funds expense summary, the numbers get a little weird here because of the debt that we issued, and we had the refinancing last year, and now we have the big expenses for the referendum project. So to me, the net total expenditure number is really misleading. Our expenses are really not going up by 87% if you don't include the referendum project. But all the expense numbers are there. But for every fund from last year to this year. Looking at the tax levy composition and comparables, revenue limit tax levy of 5.6 million with a referendum approved debt for Fund 39 debt levy of 2.1 million, which includes the $250,000 amount for defeasance. We have a total school-based tax levy of $7,788,031, which is a 4.73% increase from last year. Equalized values went up by 10%, so the mill rate dropped 4.75% down to 5.82. I'm not really going to go into that over levy defeasance again, but just so it's on the record, the overall levy does include that $250,000 amount for debt prepayment. And then just to look at the school tax levy credit one more time, even though the tax levy is set to increase by 4.73%, when you take into account the school levy tax credit, which, as I mentioned, that was only a 75% estimate of what it's probably going to be. So the actual tax impact will even be lower than what I'm projecting. When you factor in the school levy tax credit and the net new construction, you get a total tax impact for the average taxpayer of negative 0.36%. And it should be more than that once the school levy tax credit amounts are finalized. Any questions?
Can I have a motion, please?
I move to approve the 2023-24 budget and levy a school tax assessed against all taxable properties within the district in the sum of $7,788,000 and, $7,788,031, which includes a general fund 10 levy of $5,567,823 necessary to operate and maintain the district school system and to finance the recommended budget for the 2023-2024 school year.
Just so everybody knows, like, we just spent an entire hour talking about this. So, like, if you're watching remotely or you're just walking in, but like, they just kind of glanced over all of that. We just spent an hour talking about it. So you can go back and look. So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. I just don't want people to think like, it's just like willy-nilly $7 million.
All right, so this is the second reading, and I got it down correctly. So the second reading of our committees, which you're going to, I'll put it in my board update this Friday, but you're going to need to email Ted. So next month he can appoint members, but the updated language for our committees is that we are removing the maximum board member per committee, and we are just establishing a minimum of 2 board members per committee.
And you'll, in the communication out, you'll say which committees those are
Yes,
that
sir.
we
Yep.
approved a long time ago.
Yep.
Can I have a motion, please?
I move to approve the second reading of update to policy 0155 regarding membership as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, so here's our information. We have a student presentation. Thank you for being such patient presenters too, so I appreciate when I come on down. And you're gonna have to give me like a wink or a nod or a fist bump to let me know when I need to move on the slides. And then we can. You face, yep, you're presenting to these folks. They just get to be a part of you, but it's really to these.
Ready? On October 17th last week, our 7th grade class went on a unique field trip that has never been done. We traveled to South Milwaukee for Hispanic flamenco ballet.
We learned about many different dances, customs, foods, and dresses. There were so many costume changes that Miss Walter had trouble keeping up with all of it and wondered where to look.
In the first slide, Caleb, Mason, and I are learning a dance. I am on the right. You can see in the video how much fun we had. The dancers make it look way easier than it is.
In this slide, Jason, Chris, and I are learning a different dance. You can see just how into it Chris gets.
You want to play this one?
Yeah.
This one?
Se vuelva a parar, que se pare dos veces, pelotera la bola, mira cómo se le va la bola, yendo, yendo. Pelotera la bola, mira cómo se le va la bola.
This is the one that Chris did.
Okay, so. is this, I'm on the right side for the next part of the thing?
There's two more.
Oh, go to the art.
I just read about.
Okay.
And then this one is really short.
Okay.
Because they
Who's-
start
who's-
standing in front valley.
Okay, who's gonna speak? Are you gonna speak, or is this your parts? You gonna say it
yes,
again?
I
Okay.
So here's a dance Caitlin, Elizabeth, and I got to learn. I'm having a great time. You can see how much in this video.
Okay. Okay, yeah, please tell us.
This picture shows the beautiful dresses of Spain.
This one.
Wow, this one shows the uniqueness of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil.
We really learned so much, and thank the school board for supporting our trip to the Hispanic Flamenco Ballet.
Awesome.
It was amazing. Aren't you glad you don't have to follow that?
That was awesome.
Yeah.
Probably could have been one of the teachers, Mari maybe, right? That was amazing. That's fun. Okay, I'm gonna have to follow that, so I'm gonna read off of mine. All right, so on Friday, part of admin team was able to join Mr. Witt at his home across from Salem School to wave at the passerbys, the people who are passing by. We are honored to celebrate him tonight.
Ago, when our son Hunter started kindergarten, they had watched him previously. My dad used to drive him to 4K every day. We lived in Genoa City at the time, so I had him come to Salem. And then when he started kindergarten, he came to school with me, and he didn't need to go by Grandpa anymore. So I think he was a little sad. So Grandpa would stand in the window and wave at Hunter until Hunter said, "Grandpa, I can't see you in the window." So then Grandpa came out to the end of the driveway, and he's been there for 11 years, waving to first us, and then my friends would know that was my parents' house, and they would wave both hands at him, some people. And then it just skyrocketed into so many more people, lots of Salem families, other schools, the high school kids finally started waving to him. Other people that go to other schools, different jobs, he'll get stopped in the morning just to chat with him. He knows so many people, a car will go by and, "Oh, that's so-and-so," or "That's so-and-so." And one really cool story, a few years ago in the summer, they had a tree fall over in their front yard, and they called Hunter and I to go over and help them clean up. And all of a sudden a car pulled in their driveway, and a mom and her high school son got out, and she said, "You brighten our day every single morning, and you need help. So we're here to brighten your day." And they stayed and helped us clean up the tree that had fallen over in their yard. So, good job.
So on behalf of the board, the Salem Board of Education and Administration, wanted to give you some fabulous gifts and prizes that you can wear when you're out there.
Can I say something real quick?
Yeah.
So I was out of town this weekend in Madison for a hockey tournament, and I'm talking to another team, a parent, and they find out that, "Oh, you live in Salem? Oh yeah, we live in Trevor. Cool." The next thing out of their mouth was, "Do you know that man on AH that waves at everybody?" I mean, you're a celebrity. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that felt good.
That was great.
All right, so as I mentioned in our annual meeting, we're going to do a student assessment update. This is one of the cornerstones of our strategic plan is to address our student growth and achievement in all areas. And so I've got Craig, our data specialist. You're just going to have to point at me. He's going to do a presentation to give you an update on our data so far this year. Yeah, do you want to use the podium or do you just want to?
I am just standing.
Okay.
Before we get to student assessment, Mr. Witt, we used to drive my kids down AH to their sitter before they started school every day. And you became known as the good morning man to my kids. And when you weren't out there, my kids didn't care about me. They're like, where's the good morning man? Like, I knew where you were. So thank you for that too.
Last year was a bad year.
It was. You were missing a little bit last year. But any day that it wasn't out
I
there,
was in the hospital,
but we're back.
back and the hip.
Better than ever. All right. Assessment update. We're going to look at some MAP data from last year. The MAP data that we're going to look at today is basically our scores from winter of last year until last spring, which corresponds to once all of the new programming that came with Dr. King was basically put into place. We're going to look at growth, not just growth data, but also achievement data in reading and math. If you have any questions throughout, please feel free to ask. This data, first data, this is an overall school shot of our reading data. So this is grades 3 through 8. Now this is the top line in all of these is the growth. And growth data doesn't necessarily mean who grew the most. It means who met their projected score. So every NWEA test session, every year the kid is given like, you should grow about this much. It gives them a goal score. That blue bar all the way on the right for growth is kids who far exceeded their growth number. The green bar next to it is kids who exceeded their number. The yellow is kids who met their growth number. The orange is kids who grew but didn't quite meet their number. And then the red is scores that either remained the same or decreased. So this is our overall snapshot of growth for reading. We're in the 52nd percentile as far as overall growth goes in reading. So, if you put our school up against every other school, we're right there in the middle.
However, all students, regardless of, if they have an IP or whatever the case, are included in this. Though,
Every single student.
So with having a larger special education need school that we are, that could affect that 27% up there a little bit more than a school that might perform more.
It could, and there are other factors we'll talk about as we get into the kind of the grade by grade aspects of this. And then achievement in the winter, achievement in the spring. This is kind of basically the overall total score and where those kids fall in what percentile. The red part is 0 to 20th percentile according to the norms. The orange is the 20 to 40. Yellow is 40 to 60 and so on. You guys can figure that part out. So in reading, our achievement went from 54th to 53rd percentile. So we went down 1 percentile overall in reading 3.8. There are some factors we'll talk about maybe in that. So we're going to look at grade by grade and what some of those factors may be. Grade 3, you can see we got green. We're in the 62nd percentile, so that means we're in that 60th to 80th percentile. That's really good. So third grade growth is really good. Third grade growth or achievement in winter went from 53rd to 57th percentile. This is all reading. Grade 4, 44th percentile, but achievement went up. And then grade 5 is one of the areas we're going to talk about. We found some possible staffing issues that we were dealing with last year, and when you break this down class by class, you're going to find that staffing issues were.
So last year, Patty, as the principal, did a lot of work in one of our classrooms that was just really struggling. And so when we dug deeper into the data from that one of the particular classrooms, just a new teacher who really needed some additional support. So what was nice about having Craig in his role, Patty in her role, and then Carrie there's a lot of support we try to put in there, and then we've addressed some of that from an admin side. But you can see when we look at these data and also compare the overall reading, some of these students were in a particular classroom that had quite a bit of struggling, and it's nice at having Craig in this particular role because he can have like just this bird's eye view of like the data, and then with Patty where she is, she's able to ensure that she's got the interventionist and support that she needs in place as well. But
Would fifth grade also kind of had a hard hit because of COVID, because they would have been in first grade and then out of school for the remainder of it?
I think that's kind of
what we're,
like a bunch of grades did, but
yeah.
So that's 3, 4, 5. If you click again, we're gonna look at 6th, 7th, and 8th. 6th grade, again, 63rd, growth went up, or achievement went up 1%. Grade 7, 49, but achievement went down. 8th grade, 48%, achievement went down. 8th grade is another area, so 5th grade and 8th grade were the two we kind of looked at and said,
And that goes to some of the things that you were saying, Nick. There were some pretty significant needs in our 8th grade population last year, working with John and some of the people at the high school, because that incoming 9th grader, they just had a lot of needs, likely due to COVID and just to other exacerbating needs. But we were digging down into actual students and like, it made sense.
And I just know even prior to COVID, I remember some of these scores coming out as it related to Central, and we had such a large populace of our students moving over there from the special ed situation, and they count all those students similar to this situation. And they had an overwhelming amount of special needs kids there too, and that affected, essentially their special education. I remember at that time, the score impact on their overall grading of that school was so significant that it dropped it even. So,
okay.
So just kind of understanding, yeah.
that's reading. Questions about reading. We'll get back to reading in a little bit. Overall math, you want 1, 2?
Yep, sorry.
All right, so here's math. Math, we were in the 53rd percentile, bars mean the same. Achievement went up in 3rd through 8th from 55 to 57. So we have increase there, we're above the mean. Click it over, we'll look at 3, 4, 5.
Yep.
You're gonna notice kind of the same thing in 5th grade there. 3rd grade looks great. 4th grade looks great, we're going up, we're green. 5th grade, that was our hit. And again, when you break this down, it's that same group of kids.
There's just a cohort in there, yeah.
That
Needed a lot of additional support, and like Patty did a great job with Craig and Carrie trying to intervene, and we did what we needed to do.
and those kids are being very closely monitored now in 6th
Yeah.
grade.
Yeah.
If you move on, you look at 6, 7, 8, it's similar. Growth is right around half in 6, but achievement is improving. 7th grade, growth is great. Achievement is improving. Grade 8, that's that same bunch that we talked about before. Potential needs, if you guys want later, I can break this down into very specific subcategories of special needs versus not. But that's our map testing grade data, and again, that goes from just the winter to the spring, because we wanted to look at, with all of the new programming in place, the supplemental stuff, the teachers having a chance to become familiar with the ERLA-ing at certain levels and whatnot.
You know what, I actually would be interested to possibly see that difference, and just for the bridging of the gap between those who don't have IEPs or 504s as it relates to this general learning curve in the school, the classroom, so.
And I know we're doing like a 30,000 foot overview right now of all of this.
Yeah, I'm just.
I think at some point it would be great to have a dialogue of really like
Subcategories and.
yeah, and more so like mapping out these cohorts, right? Like I know the data is a disaster for the last 5 years, but
Actually, Jennifer's not here, but Jennifer has been like looking at not just map data, but how does map data correlate to potential
grade distribution,
forward
right.
data from last year compared to how our Ames Web scores are.
Right.
We have the ability now through Otis, which we'll get to in just a little bit.
right, like how that all aligns.
And how
right?
we're gonna combat some of that.
Yeah.
All right, so into reading, we looked at the program of Lexia, which we use as a supplement for reading. It was brought in last year. And we looked at, is there any correlation between how much people are using Lexia versus their math growth percentiles? And you'll look at this graph, the red line up on top is how much people are using Lexia, the blue line is how much their NWA growth scores are. In 3rd and 4th grade, they used Lexia more, NWA grew more. 5, 6, 7, they used it less. It didn't, their growth is still about the same. In the 8th grade, they're very, very close there. When you broke this all down, the correlation coefficient shows that Lexia didn't really have much of an impact on the overall growth score as it was put into place last year. So there's not really a strong correlation. So the high usage leads to higher growth, but low usage doesn't necessarily see lower growth is what we found. And then we look at what are we going to do about this, which brings us to potential next steps. So first step, we're going to still monitor student use on Lexia. It's something we're paying for. We're going to make sure kids are using it. Maybe be a little bit more diligent in how we go about that. We have reach time where kids can complete these lessons. Not every kid, because some kids are pulled out for other different things, but a majority of our kids have the option of just making sure they're using the resources provided correctly. And then we're going to potentially look into possible alternative programs. Dreambox is a program we use for math. They now offer a reading program in addition to math. And we've been in contact, and now Patty and Carrie are taking over the potential piloting in a couple of classrooms to use that program and then comparing, does that make any more of a difference than Lexia? So we can look at those different cohorts and see what potentially would work better for our student population as a supplemental program. That's what we talked about on the bottom, there's 2 different parts to Lexia. The K2 part is called Reading Park, and it's more interactive, more fun, more game-like, so the kids get into it. We found that if you offer the kids right now, like you go to Dreambox for math or Lexia for reading, 95% of the time they're picking Dreambox because it's more fun. And then we've shown teachers how to turn off most of the alternative fun activities, and they earn those back, so that's how Lexia works. So again, we're exploring alternatives.
Yeah, so that's one of the things we wanted to make sure, again, if we think about the strategic plan from a financial, like what's the return on investment? I'm not looking to drop things too soon, but if there's and we're gonna see in a minute when he starts looking at the data from Dreambox, there's a pretty staggering difference. And if kids are more engaged on one platform than the other, and it's also yielding better results, rather ditch one and then go to another, but pilot it first, because I know there are some teachers that are very invested in Lexia, but when it comes down to it, I am gonna have to get rid of programs. I can't just spend the money on certain things. So finding the one that makes most sense for the district and taxpayers, so.
Could it be different by grade? So K through 3 really thrive on 1.
Sure.
But 4+, it just doesn't work anymore?
I don't think that there's I think that's an option.
Does the programming kind of categorically get more, I don't know, academic as you go up in the grades? So similar if you're in the, okay. So both of those probably do both of those things.
Oh, like, does the Dreambox piece? I would have to.
Yeah, like is one more fun for little kids, and as you get into 7th, 8th grade, it gets a little bit more academic rather than more playful learning situations.
Lexia is far, I believe, more academic. Like after 5th grade, it switches programs from 4 or 5 to
Power Up.
And it's definitely different.
So you can see in that one graph, one from
Yeah.
6th grade went to like no usage.
Yeah.
So right when it switched over, so that would correlate with that probably.
In the bobblehead effect, I see heads going like this when you talk about the different programs.
Well, and then the other piece to the Lexia, there's aspects we're finding and it's like there's a lot more in-depth the teacher has to do on the back end. So where sometimes a Dreambox is like they can create a pathway if there's a student struggling, like the Dreambox starts to help navigate that, and there's a little bit, I think, more hand holding on the Lexia side. I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying it is what it is.
That graph pretty much shows like,
Yeah.
hey, it's fun, and then it
doesn't matter, right?
But Lexia also only goes through like 8th grade, I believe. And the Dreambox one, in talking to people, actually goes through like 12th grade stuff. So we would be able to extend, because like we have some 7th grade students that are done.
Finished, yeah.
Like they're just done. They've finished all they can do, so now what for those kids?
And are both tied to like the MAP testing and our state standards? And
Yes. I'm
High school
far
use
more
any of these
familiar with
programs?
Dreambox. Sure, we'll get to that a little bit.
The other thing with Lexia is that students might get to a point where they have to have instruction from the teacher before they can move on.
Sure.
So they can wind up getting stuck for a minute, and then the other piece is they have to complete a lesson before they exit out of it, or it starts them over.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was a.
Dreambox doesn't do that. So wherever they stop in Dreambox, they pick right back up. And so that was a challenge to overcome, to remind kids, like, you have to get through this whole section before quitting, and that could account for some of the usage too, that it looks like they didn't do as much because they didn't complete it.
So, all right. Blah, 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 like steps. All right. Dreambox lessons versus map growth percentile. This is fun for me. I don't know about you guys. This just calculated math growth percentile. So that first graph, when we saw the math growth percentile, it's their growth. It's not which kids grew the most, it's which kids grew the most relative to their projected growth or goal score, versus the number of Dreambox lessons they completed per week. And again, this is a December through the end of the year. And you can see that there is a definite correlation here. As you move to the right, the more, or as you move up, I suppose, the more usage that you saw, the higher the map growth percentile. That little green line in there is what's called the least squared regression line. You don't care about that. That's the line of best fit. That just kind of measures the data. It has a correlation coefficient of 0.64, which is a strong positive correlation. Correlation goes from -1 to 1. 0 is basically nothing. -1 is it's going down bad. So a 0.64 is relatively strong, average, high, positive correlation. So as one goes up, the other one goes up. But remember that correlation is not necessarily causation. But then we get into this R-squared value, and the R-squared value basically measures what percentage of our math growth percentile can be attributed to Dreambox use. And the R-squared value calculated is 41%. So 41% of the variation or the differences in those growth rates can be attributed to just Dreambox use.
So almost half the student body benefited from this.
Right. Well, their percentage of growth was attributed to Dreambox. Right. Other factors, you know.
Would you, with a 64, you would say that would be a positive.
Curriculum, teachers, how their day was, exterior factors, all that stuff. So this is really good. Dreambox. So we saw this effect with Dreambox with the map growth, and then we decided we're going to act on this using some fun things. We're still going to monitor student use. We have this in our REACH program. We're going to do the Dreambox challenge again. I don't know if, well, you guys have kids here, some of you. Dreambox challenge last year in May, it was basically if they doubled their goal each week. So they had a 5-lesson goal per week. If they got 10 lessons per week, their name went up here. This was a crazy amount of kids that did this. So Dreambox use outside of school went way up. Kids were really into it. So we're gonna do this again, but I'm gonna change it from May, and we're gonna do it in March. So it happens before all of our end of the year testing, because if we saw great results last year, why not do it again this year? So we're gonna look at promoting growth, not just in MAP, but if we do it prior to forward testing this year, hopefully we see growth and achievement both skyrocket due to increased usage before those happen.
And that starts at grade 3?
It starts at grade 3. But the Dreambox challenge went all the way down to kindergarten.
With some formation of something.
They were in the challenge, yeah, but they're testing. We can look at basically Ames Web scores for them, and I think like 4K. 4K is now even doing Dreambox. It only goes to kindergarten, but we have 4K kids on there doing it, being active in it, learning, so hopefully we get
kind of like ABC mouse type of stuff, I'm guessing.
It's like shapes and number recognition, and it's, but it's all related to, basically when they're on there, it's related to at the lowest level kindergarten standards. So, and some of them are doing good with it. So it's awesome that we're getting it down in there.
And we would have done a challenge like that for Lexia, but like you can't, if there's a stop part that you can't, like if the kid is stuck, they have to start over. So just think of a game box when you were playing when you were a kid and you couldn't save the game and you had to start over at level 1 and you're at level 18. Like that's what the kids are experiencing every single time.
There is no Konami code, so you don't get the 30.
Going back to our policy meeting.
Up, down,
We don't know.
As a parent and a board member, I mean, I remember when we approved a lot of this, but this might be some of the first time I'm really hearing about any of it and what I'm saying is I could push my kids outside of school, say, hey, you do this, this, and this, and then you could have real video game time or whatever the case might be, right? Is there any way for parents to monitor, like if they say, hey, we did 2 or 3 lessons in here through the course of the week to help promote that outside of school? Is there a way that we can monitor that as parents to try to justly award our my kids outside of school? Is there a way of that or no?
It's laborious, I think, on our end to get it to you, but we can.
Okay.
But is there a way for them to check online though?
Just say, like you can set up a Dreambox parent account and monitor your
Yeah,
kids.
so they're like, yeah, I finished it, and they didn't even open it? Like, that's kind of what I'm looking at. Right.
Yeah, Dad, all done.
Yeah.
I got 3 lessons done in 20 minutes.
And that can happen. Like, that's legit can
Well, I mean, I'm okay if I can,
Yeah,
right.
but there is a way for you to actually, there are parent accounts available.
Right.
For you
Okay.
to monitor kids.
Get it out.
And I'll just say as a parent,
They can show you their
the finished screen thing.
Well, like when they're done, there's like a star thing on they can show you how many stars they have, and that's how many lessons they completed that week.
Sure.
But we can get you guys all the parent stuff, and we can get that out.
I'll be a testing parent on this one.
100%, yeah, we can
Done.
get stuff out.
Consider it
You
done.
want Minecraft? 5 lessons.
100%, like, yeah, do stuff like that.
It's gonna cost
So-
you
Oh, it's
5
gonna
lessons.
happen. The Ploney household is in prison now.
And we can also now supplement our Bridges, our math in K-5 with Dreambox. And it's our assessments in Bridges have all been transferred into being recorded in a program called Otis. And in building these, we've assigned standards to every single question. So at the end of every single assessment, we get assessment results, which is this top bar, these top bars up here. This is the 4th grade's Unit 1 test from this year. There were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 standards assessed on their Unit 1 assessment. Blue is good, red is bad. So we can go like standard by standard and say, as a grade level, this is how you guys did on Unit 1 assessment. And we can break down, is it from a specific classroom? We can do this class by class. We can look at one kid's specific standards now. And what we did is we took all of the standards and we took the one area where you are really, really strong, or you finished really strong in this year. And this one, it happened to be a 3rd grade standard.
Where do you want me to be?
You're good on
Okay.
that sheet.
Do you want me to make it bigger?
No. But basically what we've done is told the teachers now, this is the standard you did really good on. Here's exactly the language of it. This is when it's going to appear again in your assessments, and this is when mastery of this standard is expected. So know that you did really good on it, mastery is not yet expected, but what can we do with it now? So if you scroll down a little bit, we then took the Dreambox recommendations and said, if your kid did not do well on this particular standard, when you look at your kid's breakdown, these are the standards that directly lead and have a meaningful impact on that standard. These standards will now be ones that you can assign in Dreambox, because in Dreambox, teachers, administrators, we can all assign students tasks.
So they're lessons, essentially.
Lessons, games, whatever you call them, but based on very specific standards. Like, I want my kid to work for this kid to work for the next 2 weeks on 3.08.B.8 because
The
they
data
didn't do well on
showing.
this, yeah. But then we can take the data also, and then we've also looked at standards to extend. So for those kids that are just smashing everything out of the park, how can we extend for those kids? Well, we can take in Dreambox, and now we can assign the next set of standards. Like, the standard you did really well on leads to this one. So go ahead and assign and push that kid out. Even if they're not maybe in an accelerated class, we can do this for all of our kids. So we have assigned basically based on, we found the one where your grade is the strongest and the one where your grade is the weakest. and we can extend and remediate for both of those things. And I'm making these reports for every teacher for every test this year. So that goes out. And then at the very, very bottom of that sheet, there's even more. So these were the standards that were assessed on the test. You don't have to click on those, but the teacher then can have like a sample activity of what does that activity look like for that standard. And it will pop up a PDF of here's a sample lesson, this is the standard, here's the task, here's what you can do. They can send these home if they want, they can add these additional activities, this is what it looks like. Teachers now have access to that, and then we went ahead and said these are the standards that are being assessed on your next unit test and did the same thing. So this is kind of what they're going to be expected to do by the end of this unit. We're able to do this easiest, I can agree, and I'm sure Chrissy, with math. Like it's easier to do. ELA is going to be a bear when we get to it, but the hope is we can do all of this because Salem's Math Essential Standards, we identified these a couple of years ago. And we're able to map, like our teachers identify which standards they thought were the 4 or 5 most important per grade level. And then we put this together so that we can say, you didn't do good at this standard, go back to this one. Assign that, work on that. That's something we can come up with an idea on. Or you guys all knock this one out of the park. Instead of doing this activity that everyone's already shown proficiency at, let's go to the next one. And that's what that is. All right. That's data, that's information, that's a lot of junk. I see people writing stuff. What's your question, Ted?
Oh, no, I have lots in my brain. Don't worry about it right now. It's all good. Follow-up conversation.
Yeah.
No, I think it's good.
So that's what I have for assessments, for data for you now.
That's awesome.
We'll look at breaking things down further by cohorts, by different categories of students.
I always say that's because with how our district's been historically with a larger special education, I know it's gone down, but I'd just like to see that see that just so, if someone asks me about, whatever the case might be, which, this isn't obviously the school score. This doesn't give us the school score rating, does it? This particular one?
Those particular data don't, no.
Yeah, right, but still it could come up for some reason. So just have an understanding.
Yeah.
The data that do are not available.
Yeah,
So
they're gonna barcode right now, yeah.
I do have a question, not specifically about these programs, but when we're looking at what percentile rate we're in for whatever category, do we, because I'm the only board member not married to a teacher or am not a teacher, so I'm learning a lot as I go here, but it's true.
That's funny, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so I'm gonna have a lot more questions. Do you strategically try to assign in the future what percentile you want to be at? Or is everything kind of a retrospective, here's where we're at, here's where we're gonna just improve for next year? Or is there a goal of like?
Each kid has expected growth.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So for MAP, every kid does. And so MAP, what it does for us is it's linked to Forward, so we can see projections.
Okay.
So we most certainly know, and I'm not going to say we're aware, because we have seen our Forward data. It's not available to the public, but we are aware that there are some spaces that we could specifically target. We're going to target all kids. We've got programs that allow us to do that. But there are some things that we can specifically target to like move the needle in a completely different way. So we are strategic in the sense of looking how we can ensure for public, when some things are really important to them, how can we ensure that they can see that we're making growth? But we can do both Forward tests and those standardized tests typically are like retrospective data for you to evaluate program and what's not working. But we are using those data to plan forward for sure.
Sure.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. In those,
I just didn't know if you had a specific number or goal, or if like you're saying it's by student
Really
pretty
independent.
much.
Yeah.
Then,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
That's
like,
great.
and once the Forward data becomes public, it'll be part of those end of the chapter things like, here's the standards coming up, here's how they appeared on the Forward exam,
Okay.
here's how we did, here's what we can supplement with, and we have that for ELA, for science and social studies in the 8th grade, and then we also have it obviously for
So then what
math
is,
is where I live mostly.
what does DPI use, to your point, about how
Oh,
their numbers are different?
the school scoring system,
The
right? That's what
report
a lot of people look at when they're
The
looking at
report card.
communities and stuff. Yeah, the report card,
Okay.
right. Yep.
Just the report card?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Unfortunately. Good, bad, or indifferent.
Yeah. There's goods and bads, but yeah,
Yes.
it's tricky.
Moving into
It's a
the
tricky
Otis
wick.
and, like building that way
Sticky
gives us
wick.
that standard snapshot really fast.
Okay.
Is that still frozen, by the way, the report card? That was frozen for a couple of years.
Yeah, not anymore.
It's open
yeah,
again? Okay.
Yeah, so in November, it'll be
Okay,
released.
and that'd be the first year in several years that it's been open again, right? Or was it last year?
It was last year too.
Okay.
I think that crosswalk of standardized data versus local data is such an interesting visualization, right? Like I think sometimes when you look at your grade distribution and you see students with an A and an A and an A, you're wondering how come that's not transferring to some of these results, and can we catch some of this sooner, right? Like,
And that's,
and I think like that, what you were just sharing is really helpful to that, right? When you look at that end of the unit assessment and you're like, okay, these are the skills that are, as a grade, we're struggling with, or as an individual teacher.
like within that, like teachers are gonna have access to all of this too, where they can, and I can't click it because then kids' names all come up. Sure. But they can like legit click that top yellow thing and it'll tell them which kids it is. Sure. And so they can group those kids and there's all kinds of stuff we'll be able to do eventually here. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I talked way too long.
Oh, it's good.
All right, so there were no committee meetings, so no reports. So the next meeting will be November 28th. So we need to, someone needs to adjourn. Oh, no, we need to, never mind, just
So
joking.
We're essentially with the open meeting portion, we're done.
Yeah, yep.
And then we're gonna be going to closed.
Yes. Can I move to adjourn?
Do we need to adjourn after closed though?
Yeah, yep.
So we
Can I move to go into closed session?
Yeah, I move that the board go into closed session in the middle school library pursuant to the following statute, Wisconsin Statute 19.851C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which a governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, and we will discuss the contract of the current administrator. The board will reconvene in open session to take any action, if need be, from closed session.
I'll take a vote to go into closed session. Jack?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Ted, aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We are now in closed session.